Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 176, Amy Bock, Part 4. This part continues the trial that Amy went under for quite a few of her cases that caught up with her, namely, firstly, the one where she impersonated a man named Percy Redwood. And on the 29th of May 1909, in the Grafton, Clarence and Richmond Examiner, Mr. Redwood, alias Amy Bock. There was another large assembly at the Dunedin Police Court on Friday, where Amy Maud Bock, the masquerader, was further charged with having on the 20th of February obtained £41 from Margaret Henderson by means of false pretences. Chief Detective Herbert explained that the accused was a single woman as far as the police knew. In January last, she called at a boarding house kept by Mrs. Butcher at Cork Place and was received there as a male boarder. She stayed for some time off and on and paid her board during the time she was there. After some weeks, she went to the Nuggets, where she remained for some considerable time. On the date of the alleged offence, she returned to the boarding house in Dunedin and saw Mrs. Butcher's sister, Miss Henderson, to whom she told a story about a loss she had at the Nuggets. She had been out fishing in a boat with Mr. W. Ottaway, and they were hauling a large groper when a rowlock got caught, with the result that her pocketbook dropped into the sea. She said it contained a £50 cheque and an IOU for £60, which she lent a man at Hanmer, and a large number of sovereigns. She added that she had come to town to get a diver from Port Chalmers to go to the Nuggets to find the pocketbook. She left the house for the purpose of getting a diver, she said, and returned an hour or two later, stating she had got one, who would not go down for less than £50 cash. She asked Miss Henderson if she could lend her the amount. Miss Henderson replied that she had not so much as that, but she would lend her all she had. She went to the Post Office Savings Bank in a cab, which the accused had waiting, and on these representations drew £41, all the money she had, and gave it to the accused. Later, the accused went away with the money, and Miss Henderson had never received the money back or any part of it. William Ottaway, fisherman, said the accused arrived at their house at the Nuggets dressed in male attire and passed as Mr. Redwood. She never went out in a fishing boat with him, neither, to his knowledge, did she go out with anyone else. He never heard anything about her losing a pocketbook and a large sum of money. The accused pled not guilty and reserved her defence. She was further charged with having on the 8th of March at Roma Harper wilfully made for the purposes of being inserted in the marriage register book of Reverend Blathway a false statement that her name was Percival Leonard Carroll Redwood and that she was a bachelor. George Ottaway, residing at the Nuggets City, remembered the accused going to his boarding house on the 27th of January, where she remained off and on until the 25th of April. The witness knew the accused as Percy Carroll Redwood, a wealthy man. The accused asked him if he had any objections to her keeping company with and marrying his daughter. The witness said he would like to know her position regarding her ability to keep his daughter, who'd always had a good home. The accused said she'd written to her mother and would have a reply in a day or two. She told him that her mother had £1,500 of her money, and in addition to that amount, she had another £1,500 invested in one of her uncle's farms at Waikato. Marcus Jackman, the Register of Births, Marriages and Deaths at Roma Harper, said that on the 8th of March, the accused called at his store and filled in the marriage notice and applied for a marriage licence. The witness issued a certificate of marriage to the accused, who paid the fees, £1 2 shillings and 6p. The witness was deceived into the belief that the accused was a man. Detective Hunt said that when charged on the previous day, the accused said, "I will plead guilty." The accused was next charged, having on the 15th of April obtained from B.S. Irwin £10 by means of a false pretence. Stokes Irwin, barrister, said the accused applied to him for an advance of money. The witness asked about the security, and the accused said that she had 1,200 sheep on an estate in Waikato. She further said that each of her father's sons had received £1,500 on attaining his majority, and she had given money to her mother to put into a business. Horses and a trap were also mentioned, and a pair of cobs. He told her he would have to make inquiries before lending her money. She said it was unfortunate as she was going to the train to meet Mr. and Miss Ottaway, and that she was in a bit of a fix through losing her money. Witness thereupon gave her a cheque. Her representation subsequently proved to be false. but the money was recovered. On the accused being asked to plead, Mr. Moore said the accused has been asked to plead guilty to 3 charges. The accused then said, "I wish to say a word. I wish to thank Mr. Moore who has undertaken this case and has given his fee to Miss Henderson. He has undertaken it without any remuneration whatsoever and for the purpose of helping me in alleviating my punishment. I also want to thank the press for remembering that I was a woman in spite of all I have done. There is no use expressing my regret yet because I would not be believed." The accused was then committed to the Supreme Court for sentence on 3 charges. An ex-police officer gave a New Zealand Times representative particularly interesting details on the early career of the now famous Amy Bock. The ex-officer's story is as follows. "I was amused and sorry at the same time to read of poor little Amy Bock's latest freak. The marriage business certainly eclipses any of her former uncommon episodes. I knew her very well a good many years ago. I first came to know her as an inmate of the Caversham Industrial School. She was then 17 or 18 years of age. I think she was sent there from the north somewhere to be under the charge of the late Mr. Titchener, the first master of that institution. I think poor Amy had to remain until she was 21 years of age. I knew nothing of her again for a few years when several peculiar frauds were reported to me by tradespeople. The police were inquiring all round, and I found her with a highly respectable and religious family who thought her to be the most God-fearing young woman they've ever come into contact with. She sang hymns and psalms with them every night. They were highly indignant at the shocking blunder by the police in even suspecting such an exemplary person of crime. While she was preparing to accompany me, I heard the mistress of the house whispering something to her about a gold watch, but she sharply told me it was none of my business, that the watch was all right. I, however, continued the subject until I found she gave it to the young lady to take to the watchmaker for repairs. I inquired the name of the watchmaker. Amy gave me a name. I suggested to the owner it might be advisable to see the watchmaker without delay. She told me I was too suspicious altogether and that they would see justice was done to this exceedingly nice young person. This lady's son attended court the next morning to see justice done to the innocent. I told him his mother's watch was not in the watchmaker's shop, that he denied ever seeing it. Amy stoutly maintained that she had given it to him. So far as I can remember, I took Amy and the young man face to face with the watchmaker to point out the man she gave it to. She was still positive she gave it to him, while he was as positively denying he ever seeing her. After half an hour afterwards, I found the watch in a pawn shop. Still, her friends could hardly bring themselves to believe such a person would do such a thing. I think this was the first time she was in the hands of the police in Otago. Some time afterwards, she got into a gentleman's house about the northeast valley. The family went away on a holiday, and she either sold the piano or got a loan for it. She defrauded several other people. Amy Bock completed arrangements on Friday with a Dunedin photographer for the sale of the rights of her photograph in male attire, with a view of the money being obtained to go to her defence. The firm of solicitors who will appear for her have, however, generously decided to hand the money over to the Dunedin young lady who was defrauded £41. The gold watch, chain and medal which the accused was wearing when arrested were borrowed by her from the person in Christchurch before she went to Dunedin and will be returned to the rightful owner. At 9:30 yesterday morning, says the Otago worker, on the 4th of May, people were scrambling and struggling to obtain entrance to the City Police Court. At 10 o'clock, interested spectators were packed tightly into every available corner of the Hall of Justice, and some scores of disappointed persons unable to gain admittance stood gloomily about this Stewart Street doorway and audibly wished they'd come earlier. Everyone was there to obtain a glimpse of the masquerader Amy Bock, who was to appear to answer to one of the many charges that have accumulated against her during the past 4 months. At 11:30, Amy Bock was brought in. It was difficult to associate this small, meek-looking woman with the clever masquerader Percy Redwood, the tale of whose adventures had for a week kept the whole countryside agog. She was partly hidden in an ill-fitting grey ulster and a battered straw hat, but she was not, as on her last appearance, heavily veiled. As she came from the prisoner's room, she kept her head down and crept to the dock as if she was wishing to hide herself from the curious gaze of hundreds of eyes immediately focused upon her. They saw a long, thin, dark face that might have once been handsome, but was now wrinkled and haggard. Seen in profile, the features were regular and pleasing, and the head sloped away from the back of the neck in the manner that indicated a clever and subtle brain. Only a few times during the proceedings did Amy Bock raise her head, and then one saw her eyes, her most remarkable feature. The bowed head and the weary face were those of an old woman, but the eyes were the eyes of youth, bright and alert and fiercely assertive. Once or twice, as she glanced at the witnesses or at the court officials, one might have said that the quick look conveyed an appeal or a reproach, for her face is, despite its tired, heavy lines, essentially that of the accomplished actress, and her eyes are full of swiftly varying expression. Her attitude in the dock was drooping. She turned her back on the gaping throng, wherein ladies with fashionable millinery were jammed, with factory girls and city merchants and labourers that struggled and pushed, and rested her elbow on the edge of the box and hid her cheek in her hand. Amy Maud Bock, said the clerk of court, alias Skevington, alias Valence, alias Shannon, alias Chanel, alias Percy Carroll Redwood, are you charged with that you did on January the 4th, 1900, commit forgery by forging the name of John Roy to a receipt of £92 and did utter the same to one William Ellis? As she was charged with an indictable offence, the accused was asked to plead. It was noticed then that Amy Bock was trembling greatly and that she was quietly crying. This display of emotion apparently interested the spectators, and the unfortunate woman was more than ever the cynosure of all eyes. Her counsel, Mr. Moore, addressed the court, remarking that the room was full of people anxious to get a view of the accused. She felt her position a good deal, and the public gaze was not at all relished by her. Perhaps his worship could see his way to allow her to have a chair with her back to the public. It would only be a matter of kindness to do so. His worship asked, "Do you consider the accused ill?" Mr. Moore said, "I say if she is allowed to stand in the dock, that she will break down. I interviewed her this morning and was quite certain that she was almost breaking down. It would be an act of kindness to allow her to sit." His worship asked, "Is the accused delicate?" Chief Detective Herbert said, "I have no reason to believe that there is anything wrong with her. Judging by the letters she has written herself, she does not suffer from any organic disease. She is healthy, but not physically powerful or very strong." His worship said, "I don't see why it should make any difference between this accused and any other accused person." Mr. Moore pointed out that the trial might be a long one. The accused had been suffering during the last few months, although it might not appear so to the public. During the time she'd been at the Nugget, she had been in fear the whole time, and now the excitement of that was over. His worship said, "I cannot grant the application on the grounds of which you ask it." Chief Detective Herbert said the accused had intimated that at the conclusion of the case she intended to plead guilty, and for that reason the case would be considerably shortened by omitting certain evidence. The case would be proved just the same, but without so many details, so that she would not have to be detained long. Chief Detective Herbert then outlined the case. For about 7 months prior to January last, Amy Bock had been employed as a domestic servant in the house of Mr. John Roy in Roslyn and was known as Agnes Valence. About Christmas Day, Mr. Roy and his family left the home for a holiday and remained away till the 6th of January, leaving her in sole charge and the only occupant of the house. On the 30th of December, the accused had an interview with Butler and Gray, financial, house and land agents, and on that date she wrote a letter to the firm regarding a loan on the furniture of Mr. Roy's. The letter was dated 10 Beta Street, Roslyn, 30th of December 1908. "Regarding the loan of £30 on furniture, of which you could not arrange before Thursday, I have wired and received a reply that £80 I spoke of must be sent to reach Christchurch not later than 12:30 on the 7th of January. If you can do this, will you come up on Monday to see the furniture? I will meet the first train after 9:30. Kindly let me know at once, or otherwise I'll have to go to Christchurch and do it myself. I don't want to do that, as I'm only recovering from an attack of influenza. The value of the same can be made out for £50 if you agree to do business. Charlotte Skevington." It was as Charlotte Skevington that she approached Butler and Gray. On receipt of the letter in question, Butler and Gray communicated with Mr. Ellis, a flock manufacturer carrying on business in Kaikorai Valley, who sometimes lent money, and he called on Charlotte Skevington at Better Street. He was admitted to the accused and was shown the furniture in 2 rooms, and she produced this receipt. Mr. Ellis was satisfied and agreed to make the loan of £30, referring to his solicitor, Mr. Forsyth, who would complete the transaction. She called on Mr. Forsyth the following day, the 6th, to sign the necessary document, and he paid her £30 in cash, taking her receipt. On the same day on which she got the money, Mr. Roy and family returned home, and she was there to receive them. Mr. Roy had no knowledge of what had occurred, and she did not communicate anything to him. The next morning, the 7th, the accused told Mr. Roy that her brother and a Miss Franklin had come to town by train the day before, and she asked for the day off to go and meet them. She left that morning, and that was the last Mr. Roy saw of her, and the first he knew of a furniture transaction when he was called on by the detective and Mr. Ellis. The next that was heard of the matter by Mr. Ellis was contained in the following letter. Northeast Valley, Dunedin. Mr. A. Ellis, dear sir, I do not know how to write what I must write to you, but I beg of you to read this letter through before you form any judgment. I have deceived you, but it was under very, very great temptation, and I do beg of you to forgive me, if you can, and have patience, and you shall not lose one penny. For God's sake, have mercy. I do not know whether you have any little children of your own, but if so, then the mercy you show to me, the same may God show to them, if it ever be their need in any way. But let me tell you all. You remember I told you my brother had committed a crime and that I must have £30 to save him? Quite true, but now I have committed another to get £30 from you, for that furniture was not mine. My name is not Skevington, but Valence, and I have worked for Mr. and Mrs. Roy for the last 7 months. Miss Skevington is a dear friend and engaged to my brother, and she came to see me the other day to see if we could save him. The amount needed altogether was not £80, it was £130, of which she could only find £50, and I do not know what to do myself to make up the balance. Well, I had to find £30. We were planning how to get it when she suddenly said, "Oh, how I wish this furniture or some of it were mine and I'd soon get it." I said, "How?" And she said, "On a bill of sale." After she had gone, I was worrying, and at last I made up my mind to risk it. So then I went to Butler and Gray and they sent you. Oh, you don't know how frightened I have been ever since. I went twice down to the valley to confess to you, but could not find courage. I know you can have me put in jail if you like, but I beg and pray of you to not do that. You have lost not one penny, not one. The instalments shall be paid into Mr. Forsyth's office every fortnight, as I said, and in March the whole debt shall be settled, for it was the truth that I told you about having money of my own. It was really, and you shall have every penny back in the time stated. I don't know whether you have seen Mr. Roy, but I have not said a word to them about this matter. I cannot go back and face them, though I feel so miserable and ashamed. I have another brother down here, just now very dangerously ill, and I am staying with him at Northeast Valley. He was ill before, and now the worry about the other boy has made him worse. Oh, do try and forgive me and trust me still. Think if you arrest me, it will mean years in jail for me and the loss of all of your money to you. But if you trust me, you shall not lose anything. I am so sorry I did it, so sorry. Will you meet me at Mr. Forsyth's office on Monday at 11 and talk it over? I would say tomorrow, but I suppose by the time you get this it will be too late, as I am told the lawyers all close on Saturday afternoon. But I will be there on Monday. Once more I beg and pray of you to be merciful, and you shall be paid. I shall not leave Dunedin, but I shall get work somewhere near, so that you may always know where I am. If you are willing to meet me, will you put an ad in tomorrow in Saturday's Star? Just say, AE will meet AV Monday, and I shall know. Please don't mention it to Mr. Roy if you have not done so. If you assist me, you shall have the full £50 in March. I can honestly promise you that. You see, it was the security I was at a loss for. Oh, and if you only know how I feel about it, I am sure you would pity me, even though I have done so wrong. Yours regretfully, Agnes Valence. P.S. Do give me a chance, and if I fail in one instalment, you could still take steps. Mr. Ellis communicated with Detective Hunt, who went with him and made inquiries. They called on Mr. Roy on the 9th of January, and that was the first time Mr. Roy knew what had taken place. Another letter was written to Mr. Forsyth, and it read, Dunedin on Sunday. Forsyth, Esquire. Dear Sir, Miss Valence has just told me all about the terrible trouble she has got into through trying to help her brother. I mean in regards to Mr. Ellis and the bill of sale. Of course, she has really committed forgery by using my name and Mr. Roy's, but she and her family are very dear to me, and I assure that you are up to this. She has borne a spotless reputation, so I am going to help her out of her trouble. That is, if you and Mr. Ellis are agreeable to what I propose, and that it is that you fill in a promissory note for £50, payable on the 25th of March, and post it to me, addressed to Miss Skevington, Fitzgerald Avenue, Christchurch. I will sign it, and I will get my brother George to back it, and Mr. Ellis can hold that as security against the bill of sale. The fortnightly instalments will be paid as arranged. You can wire Mr. Salter, Christchurch, and inquire as to whether my brother and I are good for £50. I refer you to him, but I don't wish you to mention Miss Valence's business. I will pay cost of wire. I am leaving for Christchurch tomorrow, first express, as I want to see young Mr. Valance before he leaves for the north tomorrow night. I shall be in Dunedin again on the 19th when I will call at your office. In the meantime, you please forward me your promissory note and I and my brother will sign it and post it back to you. Had I known of this trouble before, I could have called on you yesterday. It is a dreadful business, but I do hope you will persuade Mr. Ellis not to take proceedings against my friend and all will be well. I will see that he is secured against loss, and as I told you, for my reference, you can wire Mr. Salter's solicitor, Christchurch. Miss Valance was to have seen Mr. Ellis at your office this morning, but she is so ill and cut up what she has done that I have persuaded her to come up to Christchurch with me and keep quiet and leave the matter to me. Of course, if Mr. Ellis is determined to take proceedings, then nothing can be done, but I do hope he will give her a chance, as otherwise it means lifelong ruin for her. And remember, it was for her brother's sake she did it, not for her own. Her father is in Fiji at present, and it would break her father's heart if this was known, but if you will do as I say, it will be settled satisfactorily. If you are determined to have her arrested, you will find her with me at Fitzgerald Avenue, Christchurch, but I do beg of you not to take steps that you may afterwards regret. Write me at once and let me know what arrangements you come to, and if it will be necessary for my brother to come down with me when I return. I feel so upset myself over this trouble that I can scarcely write. I am, dear sir, yours truly, C. Skevington. I am not going to tell my brother of this trouble either, but just get him to back the note as an ordinary loan, as he has done for me before in another case. That letter, said the Chief Detective, was received by Mr. Forsyth on the 11th of January. A warrant was issued for the arrest of the accused, but nothing more was heard of her until she was discovered at Port Molyneux, masquerading as a man, and was there arrested by Detective Hunt. Evidence was given by Arthur Ellis, flock manufacturer, carrying on business at Kaikorai Valley. On January the 5th, he went to Better Street and saw the accused and was admitted to the house. He told her he had called as a result of her application to Butler and Gray for a loan of £30. She said that she was Miss Skevington and she was showing him the furniture in 2 rooms, which she said was her own, with a receipt from Mr. Roy produced, and of which he made an inventory. She said she was a very old and intimate friend of Mrs. Roy, with whom she was living as a friend. Mr. Roy, she said, was at Moraki, and he would confirm her statements. The witness decided that the security was satisfactory and he referred her to Mr. Forsyth, who would make all the arrangements. The following night, after she had received the money, she called at his house and said she would speak to Mr. Roy that night and asked that he speak to him the following day. On the 9th of January, he received a letter signed Miss Valance, and in consequence of that letter, he saw Detective Hunt, and that was the last he saw or heard of the accused until she was arrested. David Forsyth's solicitor said that the last witness was one of his clients. In consequence of a communication he received from Butler and Gray on the 5th of January, he wrote to Mr. Ellis, and that gentleman, after inspecting the furniture, offered as security and handed him an inventory. He prepared a document, an instrument by way of security, and a promissory note for £41 and 15 shillings as collateral security. On the 6th of January, the accused called by appointment with Mr. Ellis and signed documents Charlotte Skevington and received £30 in cash. Later on, he received letters signed Valance and Skevington, which he handed to Detective Hunt. John Roy, house and land agent residing at 10 Better Street, Roslyn, said the accused was in his employ as a domestic servant for 7 months to January last under the name of Agnes Valance. He had not known her previously. He and his family departed for a holiday on Christmas Day, leaving her in charge. He returned on the 6th of January and found everything all right. The next morning she was given a day off to meet her brother and Miss Franklin, who'd arrived in Dunedin on the previous evening. She did not return, and then the witness discovered that mostly all of her effects had been removed from the house. She had no claim on his furniture. The signature on the receipt produced was not his, but part of it, the John, was a very good imitation. The first he knew of the furniture transactions was when Detective Hunt and Mr. Ellis called on the 9th of January. The accused was a fairly good domestic servant and was thoroughly trusted. He had no intention whatsoever of dismissing her. Detective Hunt said on the 25th of April he arrested the accused at the Nuggets. She was in male attire, masquerading under the name of Percy Carroll Redwood. He told her that he arrested her as Amy Bock on a charge of obtaining Mr. Roy's furniture, and she said, "Yes, I will tell you all about it," and plead guilty at the proper time. When brought to Dunedin, she acknowledged writing the letters already produced and claimed as her own the woman's clothing found in the boarding house at York Place. The clerk of court stated the accused was about to be committed to the Supreme Court for sentence, and had she anything to say. The accused nervously said, "I wish to express my thanks to the police for the kind way in which they've carried out their duties in this matter, and also to thank Mr. and Mrs. Roy for the kind way in which I was treated by them. There is no use in my saying anything in regard to the other matter." Mr. Moore said, "I have to apply for bail. 2 other charges will be brought against the accused, one of false pretences and another of making a false declaration. It will be some time before she can come up to be sentenced by the Supreme Court, and if there is any chance of your worship granting bail, I would not object to a substantial sum if necessary. She may be able to find security." Detective Herbert stated that there would be 3 further charges against the accused. Detective Hunt had not yet gone to Port Molyneux to work up the cases, and this would require some time. So His Worship said the accused is committed to the Supreme Court for sentence. Under the circumstances, I do not think I will fix bail at this present time. That can be discussed after the other charges are heard. The accused was then charged with receiving the sum of £41 from Margaret Henderson on false pretence, and the application of the Chief Detective placed a remand that was granted in this case till Friday. Then Amy Bock was led away through the back door, and the sensation-loving crowd filed out of the court. So on the 29th of May 1909, Amy Bock, is she sane? In Wellington. When Amy Bock was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment yesterday, it transpired that she was 46 years old. During the last 20 years, she has served sentences amounting to 16 years. Her mother died in a lunatic asylum in Victoria. The judge stated he would direct the Justice Department to have the prisoner examined in order to determine her medical condition. So she was sentenced to 2 years in the New Plymouth prison. And on the 1st of July 1909, in the Bendigo Advertiser in Victoria, there was a recollection, and Mr. Maurice O'Connor, licensee of the Waverley Hotel, Auckland, formerly Chief Detective at Christchurch, once had Amy Bock in his hands. It was just after this clever woman's arrival from Melbourne in 1884 where he arrested her on false pretences. She was young and pretty, and so slight in build to be almost tiny. "I don't know what she would pass muster as in male attire," said the late Chief Detective, "but she certainly must have filled out considerably since then, as she was the last person in the world that I would expect to be able to pass as a man when I first knew her." The incident that Mr. O'Connor outlined happened nearly 20 years ago. On that occasion, and on many subsequent occasions, she has fallen into the hands of the police, given no trouble, and pled guilty without making a fuss of it. Asked what could have been the reason for the latest woman's outbreak in going through a marriage with another woman, Mr. O'Connor said the only explanation he had was the woman was mad on this particular phase of crime. Most criminals, he said, follow a particular line, and Amy Bock has always figured under false pretences. When hardened to it, criminals actually take a delight in their own cleverness, and in Bock's case, she no doubt was revelling in her own ability of deception. She's evidently mad on that point. After her release from New Plymouth Jail on probation in 1911, Amy Bock worked for 2 years at the New Plymouth Old People's Home before moving to Mokow, where she was said to have organised many entertainments and plays and was the life of the district. And at her time at Mokow, she assisted teachers of the local schools. On the 16th of November 1914 at New Plymouth, she married Charles Edward Christopherson, a farmer from Awakino and a native of Sweden. She was 55. As a result of her marriage, she was granted an unconditional discharge from her probation in 1915. However, due to Amy's debts, the marriage foundered within a year. In February 1917, she appeared before the New Plymouth Magistrates Court and was fined £20 for theft. She admitted to having obtained £15 from a local flax mill manager for the purchase of a piano on false pretences. Her barrister successfully argued that a fine should be imposed instead of a prison sentence in view of her good character since her previous release from prison, and she was fined £10 plus court costs. Apparently, before she slipped again, she had become, after moving to Mokow, after serving time for her Port Molyneux deception, very well regarded. She took part in all the activities, was a good actress, an excellent pianist, and organised many entertainments and plays, and was the life of the district. She lived quietly at Mokow for a few years, and in around 1925 she moved to Hamilton, where she may have worked for a time as a cook in a Salvation Army home. It was not until 1931, 14 years after her previous court appearance and at the age of 71, that she appeared again on 5 charges of obtaining money by false pretences. She was remanded to the Supreme Court in Auckland to face the charges, and she made her final court appearance in Auckland on the 28th of October and was sentenced to 2 years probation on the condition that she lived at the Salvation Army home. A court reporter described her as a faded old lady in a dove grey alpaca cloth costume with a drooping hat of lace straw and grey gloves. As usual, she pled guilty on all charges. Although estranged from her husband, she was still using the surname Christopherson at this time. And in the Waikato Times on the 5th of October 1931, alleged fraud, elderly woman charged. An elderly woman whose name appeared on the charge sheet as Ada Maud Seldrum, alias Ada Bock, was charged in the Magistrates Court in Hamilton today from obtaining £5 from Molly Cumming by false pretences on June the 18th. Senior Sergeant Sweeney stated that the accused was arrested on warrant in Morrinsville on Saturday. Other charges were pending, and he asked for a remand until Wednesday, which was granted. And on the 8th of October 1931, in the Wairarapa Daily Times, Amy Bock before court, a notorious masquerader. Memories of New Zealand's greatest masquerade were revived by the appearance of Amy Maud Christopherson, formerly known as Amy Bock, in Hamilton Court today. She's an old woman of 72 and had plausible stories that induced 4 women to advance her, money aggregating to £16 and 10 shillings. She pled guilty and was committed to the Supreme Court for sentence. There was a recollection on the 19th of July 1934 in the Brisbane Daily Standard in Queensland. Amy Bock, adventuress, woman who spent her life in swindling, posed as a man, courted and wedded a young girl, Australian who led police to a merry dance. And this is the article that captured my attention. Australia has produced many a clever and accomplished confidence trickster. Amy Maud Bock spent her whole life in Australia and New Zealand, but is perhaps entitled to rank as the cleverest and most remarkable confidence trickster, and she claims Australia as her birthplace. She ranks amongst the world's cleverest woman crooks, and had her activities not been restricted to Australasia, it's probable that she would have become notorious throughout the world. As a girl, she was given to strange moods and was reserved and erratic. She received a sound education, displaying not a little brilliancy at her studies and becoming a really accomplished musician. In due course, she became a school teacher and followed this profession apparently with considerable distinction. But her nature was morally warped. Before she was 21, she'd been in trouble at least twice. And although she was sent first to Sydney, where she lived with a relative, and then to Melbourne, the lure of fraud and obtaining money by false pretences was too great. She could not resist it and committed offence after offence. At this period, she presented a striking appearance. Tall and slim, with clear-cut features and large expressive eyes, there was little that was effeminate about her. Indeed, she was distinctly boyish in personal appearance, and in later life, many of her notorious deeds were perpetrated in male disguise. In an effort to check his daughter's proclivity to crime and to present her with an opportunity to make a fresh start, her father sent her to Auckland, hoping that the completely new environment in New Zealand would redeem herself. But it was a forlorn hope. Amy made no attempt to rehabilitate herself and flung herself further and further into a life of crime. Everywhere she went in the Dominion, she brought a trail of trouble. Presentable, well-mannered, and a witty conversationalist, she was admirably equipped for the life she chose to live, and her personal charms were reinforced by cunning and astuteness. For well over 20 years, she led the New Zealand police a merry dance. She was incorrigible. Time after time, she was sent to jail, but she always popped up again. And although her exploits were becoming increasingly known and victims correspondingly more difficult to locate, she was able to carry on her life of fraud and theft with a certain amount of success. Only 3 or 4 years ago, she made her last appearance in the police court, being arraigned at Hamilton in the North Island on a minor charge. She was well over 60 and was a pitiful wreck. Her personal charm and magnetism had vanished, but there was still a careful air of defiance, which added as much piquancy as any of her earlier exploits. Like every other confidence trickster, Amy had a shrewd understanding of human nature. It was part of her stock and trade. Had she not had success in selecting her dupes, her life of fraud would not have been as successful or as long as what it was. She was capable of taking immediate advantage of any fortuitous circumstances. Amy Maud Bock died at Bombay, south of Auckland, on the 29th of August 1943 at the age of 84. It doesn't appear that she had an obituary placed in the papers, so it was a quiet end to a very notorious life. The sums of money that she gained with her inventiveness were never large. In New Zealand, many regarded her as merely an eccentric. In New Zealand, Amy Bock's life has been the inspiration for plays, books, a television program, a photographic exhibition, a musical composition and more. Fiona Farrell wrote a book titled The Book of New Zealand Women in 1995 and described her as the country's most unusual and energetic con artist. In 2010, historian Jenny Coleman published a comprehensive biography of Amy Bock. And a little on her siblings. Her first brother was Alfred Parkinson Bock. He was born on the 8th of April 1862 in Hobart. He married Dorothy Brown on the 25th of March 1882 in Fitzroy when he was 19 and Dorothy 18, and they had 2 sons. He died in 1885 in Melbourne on the 21st of July. And the article on his death says, "We regret to learn that Mr. Alfred Bock, who was well known in both Stratford and Sale and employed in the telegraph office here, died at Sandhurst, that is Bendigo, early on Friday morning after a broken blood vessel. He was 26 years of age and leaves a wife and a small family. He was the son of Mr. Bock, the well-known photographer." So their 2 children, Alfred James Bock was born in September 1882 at Spring Creek in Victoria, but he died on the 31st of March 1883 in Sandhurst, aged only 7 months. And their second child, James Parkinson Bock, was born in 1884 in Sandhurst. He was an electrician and he married Mary Gladys Priest in 1905 in Bendigo. He worked as a tram conductor and they had 6 children and moved to Launceston in Tasmania by 1914. And he died in Launceston in 1934 at the age of 50 when his youngest child was only 6. Another sibling, Ethel Sophia Bock, was born on the 13th of May 1865 in Hobart. She married James Grant in New Zealand in 1886 but moved to Melbourne when their 4 children were born, and she died in Hillsville, Victoria at the age of 51 on the 3rd of April 1917. Another sibling, George Ernest Bock, was born on the 15th of July 1866 in Hobart, and he died on the 7th of October 1897 in North Fitzroy, aged only 31, at the residence of his brother-in-law, Mr. James Grant, in North Fitzroy, and it's said he was late of Wedderburn. And her half-siblings, James Blackburn Bock, was born on the 17th of February 1883 in New Zealand. He married Charlotte Mary Blake, also known as Daisy Pearl Blake, at Moores Plains, northwest of Tasmania, on the 21st of September 1910 when he was 27 and Charlotte 18. They had 6 children. In 1914 he was an engine driver living in Northcote, Victoria, but then in the same year's census he's also listed at Wynyard in Tasmania. In 1922 they were living at Lilliday in Tasmania. In 1922 they were living in Tasmania and also at Dundas in Tasmania in 1928. Charlotte died in 1936 and then he married Margaret Morby, née O'Connor, around 1936-1937. James was 57 at this point and Margaret 47. In 1937 they were living at Tulla and he was a fitter. And in 1954 they were living at Ulverstone in Tasmania and he was an electrician. And James died on the 1st of April 1978 at Beaconsfield, Tasmania, aged 95. The next half-brother was Harry Spencer Bock, who was born on the 8th of October 1884 in Auckland. He enlisted in World War I at Claremont, Tasmania on the 27th of April 1917. He stated he was a clerk at the time of his enlistment. He left from Melbourne by the August and was discharged in November 1919. He married Ada Clarice Rowe at Geeveston, Tasmania in November 1922 when he was 37 and Ada 27. And they had a daughter, Audrey, and Harry died on the 26th of May 1948 at the age of 63. The third half-brother was Walter Alfred Bock. He was born on the 12th of January 1886 in Auckland. He married Margaret Sinclair Bradshaw in Cairns, Queensland in December 1919 when he was 33 and Margaret 24. They had a daughter, Esme, in 1920, and he died at Caloundra, Queensland on the 11th of December 1962 at the age of 76. The fourth half-sibling was Sydney Herbert Bock. He was born on the 22nd of March 1889 in Auburn, Victoria. He enlisted in World War I in the 40th Infantry Battalion and embarked on the 1st of July 1916 from Hobart on the HMAT Berrima. He fought in France and returned in November 1919. He married Florence York in 1923 in Sheffield, Tasmania. They had 2 children, and he died on the 17th of February 1971 at Wynyard, Tasmania, aged 81. The 5th half-sibling was Arthur Leslie Bock, who was born on the 20th of December 1891 in Auburn, Victoria. He married Alice Maud Waterland in Victoria in 1914 and enlisted in World War I in May 1916. He was a clerk at the time of his enlistment. He left Australia on the Hirata in November 1916 and served in France. He was wounded in action in October 1917 with a gunshot wound to his left arm, and he returned to Australia in January 1918, medically unfit due to this arm injury. They had 2 children together. He lived at Caulfield in 1919, and he died on the 14th of October 1979 at the age of 87. Her 6th half-sibling was Jessie Eleanor Mary Bock, who was born on the 16th of June 1894 in Hawthorn, Victoria. She married Herbert William Rogerson. Herbert was a civil servant, and they lived at Epping, New South Wales in 1949. And Jessie died on the 28th of May 1970 in New South Wales, aged 75, and they had no children. And her last half-sibling, the youngest, was Albert Victor Bock, who was born on the 22nd of June 1897 in Hawthorn, Victoria. By 1917, Albert was farming in Tasmania. He married Nancel Beryl Vinnan in January 1925 in Tasmania, and they had 3 children. In 1931, they were living in Auburn, Victoria, where he was working as an operator, and he died in 1984 in Hawthorn at the age of 87. So a very interesting life of Amy Maud Bock, and I'll be honest, I didn't really contemplate that I was going to see the amount of misdemeanors and aliases from this young woman, so she was a complete surprise to me from the mystery that I first looked at in that article. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.